Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm joined by my co-host, Holly DeShane, and today's our 10th episode. It's super exciting, Holly. What do you think so far? Getting a little better
Yeah.
each week?
Yeah, I think we're definitely learning a little each week, getting better at this for sure. It's exciting to make it to episode 10.
Yeah,
I shared
yeah.
this with you a little earlier, but a lot of podcasts don't make it to 10, so it's an exciting milestone.
I mean, everything's about consistency. I think a lot of people struggle to put it out there because, yeah, it is, you're learning. And so they're stumbling and making mistakes and, things don't sound the greatest. And there's so many details to figure out. So I think just like with anything, it's sticking with it, kind of working the puzzles as they come up. That's how you make anything better. And so, yeah, everything's that commitment, that discipline to just kind of show up and, also have some fun with it, right? You don't want to be dreading this stuff.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. So today we're going to be talking about nurturing self trust. So self trust shows up in so many different subtle ways of just generally self doubt, not being willing to put yourself out there, second guessing, things like that. We form all these predictable patterns and really, permission to evolve. What we're trying to do is we're trying to explain why those happen and then we're trying to dismantle them to free up energy towards the future. If we're going to take new steps, we need to be able to cultivate this idea of self trust. And self trust is ultimately this idea of confidence that I can take steps and figure it out along the way. I don't have to have everything figured out day one. There's just like a lot of things that happen along the way that where we lose self trust. And many of these things that we continually revisit, it's instances from our childhood. You have to exist in society. There's partly I need to go to school. I need to do certain things. I need to force myself to do things I don't want to do or that I'm told to do. A lot of that starts to kind of dull out this internal voice about feeling confident in my actions, being able to step forward powerfully, make full commitment, things like that. Especially with this work, if we're taking an alternate path in diverting off the normal track of just go to college, get a corporate job, start a family, all that stuff. If I'm branching out, it can be a lot of insecurities come up. There could be, if I'm doing things differently than other people, there might be some backlash there. There might be a lot of things that come up that make me question myself. And so we want to really nurture this internal connection to yourself and what you're here to do and accomplish and who you want to be. Part of that, there's healing work around that to try and figure out, why do I have so much self doubt? Why do I hesitate so much? Why am I afraid to take these actions? Why do I have a lot of anxiety around uncertainties? Ultimately, we're trying to build this resilience, which is I'm going to take actions and I'm going to put myself under stress and I'm going to figure it out as I go. Part of that does take this internal connection to really problem solve and get to a better place with things rather than being stuck in a negative mindset. Because then we're just playing in this kind of endless loop or this track where we get a little bit tied up, stuck. The longer we stay stuck, the harder it is to envision this brighter future. That's where it's going to be very difficult to take new actions is when we're not, maybe it's just kind of been a rough patch and we haven't had much momentum that we've been able to create. It can be very hard to get over that hump. So it is nurturing this internal connection, getting back to what's most important to you, prioritizing the things that align with what you want. We're going to go into a few different dynamics here. We're going to try and give some context through situations. And first off, it's really this idea of why do we lose self-trust? And there's a number of reasons here, but as we've gotten through our work, Holly, I guess what are some things you've noticed, like as you've been able to really step into trusting yourself more, the kind of the before and after idea, starting from a lot of self-doubt questioning to taking a lot of new actions and putting yourself out there in new ways. I guess, can you shine a light on what that's looked like for you?
Sure, I can certainly try. I think the self-trust piece, being able to pinpoint specifically when you start to lose it, I don't know that I could do that super well, but I would say just even growing up, that just as you mentioned, the sort of things that we're expected to do where maybe you want to do something different than what's normal or what's accepted within a family, and that can cause the lack of self-trust for me. It was maybe a lot of things of like being told I had to interact in a certain way with certain people in ways that maybe I didn't want to as a kid. I think that
Mhm.
was part of it in terms of losing it. And we can dive more into how we lose it. But in terms of regaining it, I think the work I've done with you has been instrumental in solidifying it. I think I was on a path maybe a little before meeting you where I was working on it in some really tactical ways, forcing myself a little bit with willpower to keep the promises that I made to myself in terms of things like workouts or diet or showing up or whatever. But as we started working and rebuilding it, some of that has just become, the forcing has gone away. It's become possible to just, it just is,
Mhm.
versus I have to and making myself go and do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think those are some great points there. So there is this journey of going against myself. Like I said, yeah, I have to interact with these people. This is how this goes. I'm not really in control of my decision making. We want to be able to return that autonomy back to ourselves as an adult. And that's how we regain that self trust. The one you outlined was so one of the number one reasons we lose self trust is we break promises to ourselves, right? We say, I'm going to do this, and then we don't back it up with action, or maybe we start and emotions get triggered or life gets in the way and maybe we stop making progress towards something that causes this letdown of I don't really trust that I can back up the things I say I can do. That can really hurt confidence. There's also shame attached to that too, because if we're super tuned into ourselves and we're pursuing the things we want in life, motivation may waver, but it is almost this like accountability we hold ourselves to become the person we want to be. And if we're not on that track, and let's say we are on a destructive path, or yeah, maybe things have just happened and it's just really heavy to so we don't feel like we can take much action. That's with so much with our mind, it feels like these things go on forever when they are just phases that we can roll through. But it takes a lot of self compassion. So, self compassion and self trust, I would say, go hand in hand in terms of if I'm not following through on the things I say I will, then I do need to find ways to also let myself off the hook on the back end and refocus and recenter. Because if I just continue to dig a hole, that's going to make it more difficult over time. I'm just not going to really believe anything I say if I'm not doing that repair work on the other side of it. We also have fear and doubt, overcoming our instincts. So intuition's a super important thing. And we've actually talked about it earlier this week, where it's just kind of this impulse that's in tune with what you want, with what's most meaningful to you. And it's like this subtle nudge that happens. Generally, the things that excite us the most, it's our mind comes in or ego comes in and it shuts it down with justifications or fears or doubts. We start to convince ourselves why we shouldn't do something rather than following what's true in our heart. The more we give into the reasons not to do something and that's overpowering us, we're not going to really trust ourselves to take action in the long term there either. The mind comes in and I gave into the aspects that supported past pain. I'm not focused on the brighter future. I'm not focused on making things happen. I'm not building that resourcefulness to take action and then figure it out as I go. That's the big piece with confidence is we need to be able to take steps without fully knowing. That's where the self-trust comes in. It's going to give us this certainty in uncertainty, which is something we have to develop if we're going to go off the beaten path. This starts day one really with growing up in environments that don't support us following what we want. So we may be in a household full of a bunch of rules and may be very strict and limiting and like, no, you can't do that. No might be more common than yes, right?
Right.
and
Right.
and so after a while, we might get to that point of I don't even want to ask anymore. I'm just going to shut it down or just go along, go with the flow. So we start to lose our preferences. We start to give up our desires because they're not supported. So that's the thing. Not only are they not supported, but we might be left in a place where there's no good explanation. I mean, let's say we're in a more of a survival based environment where financially things are scarce. And when we're kids, we don't have a good idea of what's going on in that department. We don't really understand the dynamics of being an adult. So things might be shut down because of that, and we don't have that understanding yet. So we might be left in this place of not knowing why. That creates disconnect. So when we're left alone with disappointment and we're not given the support to work through it, what happens is we start to internalize negative things about ourselves. They said no because it's something I did, right? It's almost kind of the self punishment that happens. That's going to further disconnect us. So we're going to be internalizing shame in that process. So it's being able to accept the no, but then it also be given the emotional resources to work through it, to recenter and get back to kind of this neutral, steady ground rather than left sitting with disappointment and not being able to reconcile that in our minds. But that's what causes pain. In extreme cases, extreme disappointment and letdown, if that's accumulating over time, I mean, we've done a lot of this work where you begin to accept that, okay, this is the way things are and I can't change it. I can't do anything about it. It does create this disconnect from that impulse to act on our excitement because the doubts that and the fears that come in can be so intense that we really can't move forward. It's so suppressed in us that it's hard to get that momentum going. The self compassion piece, it's understanding, it's examining what type of environment did I grow up in? Was it one full of possibility or was it one of scarcity and no, we can't do anything? Or why would you want to do that? Maybe we had desires and we wanted to go towards them, but then we were shamed for those as well. So
Right.
that's another one. If there's instances where this could even happen with sports, let's say coming from a baseball background, there's parents that didn't do everything they wanted to baseball wise. So they're trying to like force their kids into a sport, that kind of thing. It's not coming from the kid, it's coming from the parent. It creates this deferral of, okay, well, I just need to do this because this is what's safe. This is what makes things easier. And so I start to lose touch with what I actually want. All these things, they stack up over time. The longer they go on, the harder it gets. But it's super important to get to this place of waking those things back up as we return to this autonomy of I'm an adult. I can choose to do what I want. It's not going to feel initially supported in our mind because of all this past stuff. That's where what this work is. It's understanding that wherever you're starting from, there's probably things that have stacked up on you that are preventing you from going to get what you want. That stuff needs to be addressed. Otherwise, you are going to be fighting yourself or trying to force things. You end up getting a lot of backlash from your nervous system because it's not perceived as safe. We want to develop that self compassion to restore the self trust. And seeing the context of a lot of these situations where we didn't have choices, we weren't able to fully pursue things. Obviously, when you're a kid, there's not much you can do. You're kind of told what to do a lot of the time. We want to restore that back to, okay, what do I want to do? How can I make this happen? What are the possibilities around this? Who can help me get back connected to this or who can help me learn this? We want to get to the resourcefulness that we didn't really have those options at one point. It's just being clear that you've probably internalized a lot of negative information about going to pursue things that you want. If we're going to go do that, we need to restore the self-trust piece because that's what's going to give us confidence to move forward.
Right. So if somebody, let's try to ground this in a couple of examples as an adult, right? So all these patterns started from childhood and you're repeating them. I mean, that's essentially what's happening here into your life. As an adult, if we think about, I maybe touched on one a little bit in terms of willpower, but if you think about something like you told yourself you were going to work out, I make it up, 5 days a week, and you miss one. You oversleep or get home from work late, decide you're not going to do it, and you miss one. That could be a place where you're breaking the promise to yourself and then losing the self-trust. But let's just talk through some more scenarios like that. And then how do you get back to a place where you can have the self-compassion and you can have a better outcome?
In a workout instance, you see this commonly. We do polarize a lot. So it's just, we tend to make things all or none. I'm going to go on this workout kick or yeah, maybe if I am an athlete, maybe I am working out too much where it's an everyday thing. And so anytime I'm not doing it, there's guilt and shame going on of like, oh, I should be doing this. That relationship with ourselves where it's, yeah, what does the situation need? We need to be able to create reasonable rules for ourselves given the context of the situation. So if it's just simply, I didn't do what I said I was going to do, and now I don't trust myself at all. Let's say I shame spiral. The one day turns into two, turns into five. We keep going with it. So much of the journey is it's allowing ourselves to slip a little bit because that's going to happen. It's human nature. Life gets in the way. We might have a heavier day than normal, right? Maybe something happened at work. Maybe there's some family stuff going on. we have other stresses other than that are going to get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish. It's this ability to, if I fall off track, how do I get back on track? That's getting back to center of, okay, I slipped for a few days. I'm going to take a step back. I might ask those questions like, why did I fall off track? What pulled me off? Why wasn't I committed? Why wasn't I able to take those actions? If we have all these things going on in our lives, we want to be able to design things in a way that supports it. If I'm just coming out with some unrealistic expectations of I need to work out every day, and I haven't been doing that at all, or I've been doing it maybe twice a week and I'm going to 5 days a week, something like that, that's a dramatic shift. In our nervous system, it's wired based on what we normally do. So if I'm trying to change things too rapidly, that's going to increase the likelihood of me falling off track. I need to adjust my expectations, being I'm going to work up to this. I'm going to build up to these things so that I'm not trying to change things too rapidly where it's going to be a struggle. I'm going to have to use willpower. I'm going to have to fight through it. And that's where we have people fall off pretty rapidly is you bite off too much before you're ready for it. And you're trying to make too dramatic a change too fast. So that's going to kill our self-trust. So you see these cycles of people muster up the determination to do something and then they try to do too much too fast and then they fall back. Our nervous system, it has a baseline. These are your preferences. This is what you normally do. I need to put things in alignment with that. I'm going to stretch myself in new ways. I'm going to make subtle adjustments. I'm going to increase my capacity. I'm going to add a little bit more, not a dramatic shift, because that's not supported. But it's allowing ourselves that wiggle room to be, if we're going to get results in any area, it is consistency. It's doing it over a long stretch of time. We talked about this in the beginning. We're doing this podcast and every week we talk about new adjustments to make. And it's not, oh, it needs to be perfect overnight. We need to have this perfect result. It's no, you build up to it where everything's a refinement process. You do it as much as you can manage. And then you just stack on a little bit more each time because that's what's sustainable. That's what we're trying to do is create consistency. And the only reason we're not consistent is because of mental emotional patterns. Mental emotional patterns they're practiced, they're from our past, and we have beliefs hardwired into our system that either support things or they don't. If it's not supported, I'm going to be fighting myself. When I'm fighting myself, now I'm trying to use willpower. And willpower, it's a finite energy source. It's depending on how much stress we have going on in our life is how much we can overpower something. If I have extra things going on, that's going to be way easier for me to fall off track than if I have less things in my life. And I might want to go all in on something, but I need to set my life in a way to be able to do that. Not just, oh, my life is what it is, and I'm going to add this big piece on top of it. So that's generally not going to work. I need to create space and room for that. Those adjustments generally take some time to work in, and that's how we're adjusting expectations. Because if we see everything in this realistic time frame, we're not beating up on ourselves so much for not doing something immediately, or I started on this plan and I already fell off the plan, so I might as well throw the plan away.
So thinking about maybe some other examples of how we lose the self-trust, just the workout one's a really good tangible example, I'm sure, for a lot of people. But thinking through some other possible ones, there's the overthinking thing, which is definitely one that I would say I suffer from and am challenged by. I sometimes don't always have the best self-trust around there's so many options. How can I possibly make the right choice? So that can be a really silly example of that is like I'm getting ready for a trip and I need a bag to carry a bunch of camera equipment. There's so many options. Like how in the world do you possibly pick like the best option? It becomes like this never-ending challenge of, oh, this company's like aligned with my values, but this over here is like maybe the best for the equipment and this is it, whatever, right? And so just the overthinking of something really silly like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually, I just got an office, and so I have to get a new office chair, and I'm going through the same thing. I'm like, oh, like I need the most comfortable one because I'll be sitting for extended periods of time. And it's just like it's hard without testing things out or whatever. I think we all get stuck in that in certain ways. We're trying to account for too many variables. I think it is being able to simplify and distill things down into the simplest terms possible. What's my priority here? What am I trying to accomplish with this? Because our mind is going to run. If we keep giving it options, it's going to keep expanding the window. And then we get tied up and we end up not taking action at all. It's trying to keep things as simple as possible. It's distilling it down to, like, for the bag instance or the office chair. It's just, yeah, what's the practicality of this? What do I need to that has the best of both worlds, maybe, or whatever it is. We try to remove some of the variables, because if I leave all these windows in my mind open, our conscious mind can only handle about 4 to 6 pieces of information at a time. And if I'm looking at 15 different things, now I just overloaded myself. I think the more we can filter things down and chop them down faster, that's what helps us, because most of these situations aren't that big a deal. But we don't want to make the wrong decision. We don't want to regret it later on, because maybe you bought a bag before and you're disappointed by the bag you bought, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So your mind's literally trying to protect you from that letdown again. That's all that's happening is, oh, I bought something before and it wasn't what I thought it was. And so I want to make sure that doesn't happen again. That's where we create this wiggle room of like, okay, if that happens, I'll figure it out. Let's say I get it and it's not the one I want. Well, is it good enough, or do I need to return it and get a new one? Those types of ideas. Sometimes we need to throw away all the options and just zero in and be like, I'm going to go with what I think is the best right now. And then we'll see how it goes. That's also a little bit of what we're talking about here, is that's what confidence is. I'm just going to make a decision. I'm going to roll with it and I'll adjust accordingly. Weighing ourselves down too much with so many variables, that's the analytical mind. When we restore self-trust and confidence, it's more of that intuition stuff. It's more of this, I get a feeling of what's right for me and I'm able to act on it. I don't need to know all the details. I don't need to have everything figured out. In that place, we can take a lot more action faster. If I just trust that I can figure it out as I go, that's going to be much more conducive to my growth and my ability to move forward, rather than being hung up on too many details. So our analytical mind can tie us in knots. And people that are highly analytical have a very difficult time with change, because we want the predictable stuff, because once you get settled now, you can work efficiently if you're a more analytical thinker. But if variables start shifting and changing, now we have to factor all those in, and that's where we get into overthinking. It's getting back to the center as quickly as possible. Does this really matter? Is this that important a decision? Does it need to be perfect? It's kind of letting things go and not being so particular, which that's a perfectionist mind as well. We're trying to fine tune everything. We're trying to make everything perfect, but that can be our worst enemy, right? A lot of things, it does just need the action behind it. And now we can start to move. And then from that place, you get clearer on what you actually need. It is that taking the action, we get more information about what the next step is from there.
While we're continuing on these different tangible examples, which I think are great, really helps people understand how it might apply to their life, I'm thinking about the follow through as a thing where somebody could lose self-trust. And I think about the times that you tell somebody you're going to show up for something, or you make plans, maybe it's months in advance. A friend recently shared an example like this with me, where they had made plans with a different friend months in advance, and the last minute that friend canceled those plans and was just like, oh yeah, not gonna be able to make it. And it was sort of like the day before or something, and they were like, oh, that really sucks. We've been talking about this for a couple of months. So even that sort of giving up on things or bowing out at the last second, and how that can break the self-trust.
I think it does fall into the realm of overthinking again with those instances. I think we all have those experiences and friends, or it's just, oh, like, I stop asking them to do stuff because every time it's a big deal, or you
Right.
can't rely on them or whatever, right? The mind's very good at talking itself out of things. It's just more of that. I'm going to think of all the reasons why I shouldn't do something rather than the reasons I should. The reasons I shouldn't do something, most of the time it's going to be from limitation or me trying to protect myself in some way. This goes back to resilience. A lot of times, a lot of people say no to so much because, let's say, there's social anxieties or, different situations that they don't want to put themselves in, but maybe that's what they need in order to grow. It's kind of that we have to be able to meet the discomfort and work through it, because that's the analytical mind of trying to like account for every situation. It might be shutting down our life. It might be in this place of, well, I'm always focused on the negative aspects of everything. I'm not able to see the bright side, or I'm not able to put myself out there in a new way, which is 100% necessary for any sort of growth. Is you have to put yourself out there, and not everything can be comfortable. Not everything is, we don't live in a bubble. A lot of these things, it's not going to feel good. As soon as we're in overthinking, our mind is trying to protect ourselves. It's trying to be like, well, yeah, these things have happened in the past, or you had this bad experience one time. And so that's where the anxiety is coming from, especially relationship wise. The good question is always like, what type of friend do I want to be? How do I want to show up in any relationship? Do I want to be reliable or do I want to be flaky? I don't think anybody wants to be
Sure.
flaky,
Well,
right?
right.
And also that comes from, people a lot of times they're flaky because they don't know how to say no to things either, which is we're falling into the realm of people pleasing. So all these
Sure.
things have different offshoots to them. We're going to not be able to say no to things if we told the truth in our past and there was consequences or people weren't understanding, or maybe we had volatile emotional people around us where any sort of disagreement or not doing what somebody wanted actually triggered a lot of that emotional stuff. These things are very complex. There's no easy way to do it for each person. Well, you ask yourself, what type of person do I want to be like, what type of friend do I want to be? Do I want to be reliable? What steps can I take? What small commitments can I make that I can follow through on so that I can start to solidify that I'm a person that does what I say I'm going to do? That is kind of building this integrity or this moral compass or some version of that. Of I do these things because they start to become non-negotiables if it's intertwined in our value system. I said I'm going to do it, so I'm going to do it, even if I don't want to. And it's like getting to the place of, well, we all know what it feels like to be on the other side of that. Whatever we're experiencing, we've probably done some version of that to somebody else. That's how these things go back and forth. That's also how we develop self-compassion. What are the instances I haven't shown up to something I committed to? What was going on there? What was going on in my mind? What was I feeling? Generally, there's going to be some anxieties. Generally, there's something I was really worried about. It could have been an insecurity. So that's how we start to develop that self-compassion and it's actually, we can extend that to others of, okay, they didn't show up for me, but I'm sure there's a time where you haven't showed up for somebody else. So we start to rework that and see, well, what was going on with me? That helps us frame up the situation a little bit better, where we can see it as a learning experience rather than like, oh, I'm just upset with this person. So that's really the main goal with this work is we're trying to view everything, every setback, every disappointment as something we can learn and grow from and develop more and more compassion, because that's what's going to allow us. If I can let other people off the hook, if I can be okay with it, no matter what, I'm going to start to treat myself that way too. That's the main goal, is to build this kind, loving relationship with ourselves, because that's the version of us that's going to allow for all the things we're talking about. I'm going to trust myself more because like I've released the shame, and I release the shame because I can forgive other people for the things that maybe I've done. All
Yeah.
these things, they're powerful reflections, and it's annoying, but the main question is, what is this showing me about myself? If I have this big reaction, if I have this big disappointment, well, there's something for me to learn in that. Sometimes they're hard truths. Sometimes maybe I haven't always been the best friend. Maybe I've like abandoned people, or maybe I've let people down. As we get a window into that, we can start to make some peace with it, and then we can show up more powerfully for the next time.
Yeah. That's great. So you just touched on it a little bit there in terms of the self-compassion, but we've talked about it in a couple other episodes so far, and I imagine we'll continue to talk about it because it's prevalent, but that's the inner critic voice and how that can break down self-trust, right?
Yeah. Or believing this shaming voice of our past. We've talked about this before where, it actually could have been our parents, at one point. It's this voice of, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing, or I did something bad, or I don't deserve this, or whatever it is. It's this voice that kind of pulls us away from the present moment. We're always trying to get back to this present moment. And so we have to create this detachment from the inner critic. We have to see it as the voice of our past. This commentary is it's just things we've internalized over the years. And if it's a shaming voice, if it's very hypercritical, that is where we need to develop some deep sense of self-compassion, because that's a destructive voice. It doesn't lead to better results. I might be able to shame myself into doing some things, but I'm also operating out of shame. I'm going to feel miserable while I'm doing it. It's kind of this, you commonly see this with males where it's a lot of their actions can be motivated by shame, but then they never let the shame go. So they might use it as a source of development, like lose weight, get in the gym, develop a skill, whatever it is. Generally, it's going to come from some sort of pain, but eventually we want to transform that pain and start to let it go, because if not, it does create this really negative relationship with yourself. And that voice can get really harsh over time. And the gym example was a good one. If I'm not doing it, I might actually really be beating up on myself if I don't go to the gym when I say I'm going to. It might be an intense thing. That might lead us into maybe addictions and things like that. I have this really negative view of myself, or maybe some form of self-hatred going on. That's going to lead us to want to maybe numb things a little bit more because that voice can be so harsh and intense. It's shifting our relationship with how we talk to ourselves. We always want to see it. How would you talk to a child? How would you nurture a child? How would you actually motivate them too? Do we want to motivate them with fear, or do we want to motivate them with this positive outlook or in this growth or development mindset? So all these things, it's important that we're going to have these thoughts and we expect them, but we don't have to listen to them. If anything, we can acknowledge them and accept that, hey, this is where I'm at right now in my relationship with myself. But if it is pretty harsh, like I want to create some awareness around that. And I want to ask a question, start to ask those deeper questions of how can I see the situation differently? How can I treat myself differently? What would be a better motivation for me rather than pain? We start to shift out of this negative relationship, because that does cause a lot of destructive behaviors and destructive thinking. The more we internalize negative things about ourselves, we can start to be pretty self-absorbed too, where we're just primarily thinking about ourselves rather than others. With this work, as we heal a lot of these things, you naturally start to open up your system more to be more compassionate, and also you become a little bit more service minded, where it's like you want to help people, you want to do good things for other people, because you've kind of shifted out of just worrying about yourself all the time. And worrying about yourself, there's a lot of videos out recently where that's pretty much what makes you miserable, is if you're constantly thinking about yourself. So it's this ability to expand outward. So part of it is that healing process of making peace with the past so that I can be more present and connected with myself and the people around me.
Yeah, there has been a lot of messaging around that lately. One more example, maybe before we start talking the different ways, and you've touched on a few of them already, but the different ways you can strengthen self-trust is ignoring the intuition or ignoring the gut feeling. I think about making a decision or needing to make a decision, and you just maybe have some sort of gut feeling, but I can think of specific moments where I made decisions that were against a gut feeling, in terms of signing up to be part of a group or joining a specific gym. Even I remember that I had a real strong gut feeling about one of those and totally ignored it and joined anyway, and it was not a great experience. Or taking a job. You can think of a million of them where you have a gut feeling and you ignore it. Maybe talk a little bit about how that works in the self-trust space.
We're trying to get back to this in tune with our instincts, which is, it's this information that's specific to our goals and our wants and our desires. We call this intuition, where it's just, I get a sense about things, I get a feeling about things, but it might not make sense in the moment. But our body, if we're in tune, like we can kind of know the answers we need pretty rapidly without taking into account 15 different variables. But this ability to kind of practice that, as we kind of soften the pressure we put on every decision. If we're not quite sure about something, we try to work the decision in a way that gives us a path forward. So it's just, well, I'm only willing to do it under these circumstances. And we might build in like a way out. We want to get to the place of full commitment, full trust, all that stuff. But as we're building self-trust, we kind of have to start to prove it to ourselves. Part of it is allowing for wiggle room. It's allowing, we take the pressure off every decision. Even if I make a decision that's not optimal here, I know I'm still going to learn something. I know that if it's a negative experience, I'm going to learn something about it where I can carry that wisdom forward. I'm taking the pressure off of every individual situation. And it is in the background, it's this idea of like, I'll be able to figure it out as I take the steps. I'll know better what I need to do. The hardest ones are commitments. I guess an extreme version would be choosing who you marry is a big one, where people regret that. It's like, oh yeah, I felt horrible about this, but I did it anyway. And then, it's being like a terrible marriage, right? We have these senses for a reason. What happens when, an instance like that is maybe we're too focused on other factors. It could be financial security or whatever it is. It's like we're focused on something else that's overriding what we actually feel. And that's our mind justifying that I should do this because of this. Maybe it's our parents, right? Maybe they They kind of push us in a certain direction and we feel that influence, right? The more you do this work, the more you separate from needing approval from others. If you're early on in the process, your parents' approval may be still very, very important to you in a lot of areas, right? So their opinions about things can be a direct driver of actions for you. And you might be acting on things that you have no interest or desire in, but you're doing it in the background because you're seeking that approval. Parents can want what's best for us, but ultimately we want to return that power back to ourselves of understanding ourselves at a deep level, doing the work to figure out what we want, and then heading in that direction. And when you do that, you have this strength where you start to care less and less about the outside opinions of other people. You might take in opinions like experts or people that you trust. You might accept that information, but people that aren't living the life you want, you start to separate out from that, being like, oh, it's not really valid. There is a bit of that process of where am I at my journey? Do I really kind of seek the approval of others still? Do I really care about what other people think? And then if that's the case, I need to create some separation. I need to get to my center so that I'm not just doing things because people around me want me to do that. Especially the big decisions like a marriage or something of that nature. Those are going to be some of the biggest regrets any of us could carry. Well, I don't want to take these things lightly and I want to get in my own space about them. I want to get to my center, get to my heart. And maybe I might have some trusted people around me, but by and large, I'm starting to return that back to myself because when I do it from that place, though, let's say it's me actually making the decision. Well, now I don't have anybody else to blame either. So it creates this perfect accountability structure. Okay, I made this decision. It didn't work out the way I wanted to, but every decision generally we can clean up. We can work through it and we can get to a better outcome. But getting to that place of, well, at least I have ownership over this. Because I think the hardest things we ever have is like when we make decisions based on other people and then that works out badly for us. And now our mind gets stuck in this loop of blaming external factors, which keeps us chasing our tail because we're not taking responsibility for, oh, I actually decided to do this. Okay.
Right.
It's a tough pill to swallow and it's a lot easier to blame somebody else. Some of these things can be, very, very hard truths, right? We want to make space for it and we want to know that whatever I decide, there's always a path forward. I just have to get real about it. I have to check in with myself. If I'm overriding what I feel and I take the action, generally that is going to be a negative outcome, but then we'll know better next time to trust ourselves. We'll know that a
Yeah.
lot of times we don't really dig in and do that work until we've trusted somebody else, taken action based on that, and that created a big mess for us. That's generally when we're like, okay, I'm never going to do that again. We view all these things as it's part of the journey. So for a long time, I would always have coaches and, people I talked to. And then it did get to a point where I just need to find my center. So it's just, I was done with it. Right. I'm like, I just went into my deep meditation process. I want to be so connected that I know what's right for me all the time. I want to stop looking to other people. I just want to find those answers myself. And that was a personal choice, but I'd rather it be that way of now I accept guidance from respected people only. And it's still filtered through. I'm the primary authority in my life, right? Where I'm not really deferring to anybody in anything. I might take something into account, but by and large, I'm not just taking something wholesale from a person. It's getting that level of connection where I'm completely responsible for the results I produce in my life. And I'm in full control of that. If I don't like something, I can change that. That's a high degree of accountability. These things all go hand in hand. Is I have to be able to accept I maybe gave my power away in a lot of situations and it felt like it was somebody else's fault, but we have to find a way to bring that back to ourselves. On some level, I gave permission, or on some level, I acted on that. I was a part of that process. Some of these things, it can feel totally out of our control. It can feel like there's nothing we could have done. And those are the most difficult things to reconcile. But even those, we want to, okay, what do I feel about that? What do I feel about being completely powerless or hopeless or whatever it is? I want to dig in and figure out why I feel that way and try to heal that. And then I can take some steps forward to try and restore the self-trust. If it's left in the negative place and it's somebody else's fault and it's not mine, there's not much I can do with that because I'm just going to be kind of stuck in this place of, well, this person did this to me and there's nothing I can do about it. Well, that may be true, but if we want the path forward, we have to take responsibility for what we're feeling about it. And how do I bring that to a better place that's going to allow me to take new action?
You did make me think of a question as you were talking through that, and the everything's a learning experience for sure, and you do get better at building in the outs when something's not going well. But you did make me wonder about the flip side, which would be when you are really in a place where you are tuned in and you do trust yourself and the difference in how that feels. It made me curious if you could talk about yep, I made this decision from like a really aligned place and the result was whatever it was and how that felt.
Yeah, I guess it's the more you do it, the more you kind of see the interconnectedness of everything, that even if something on the surface is a bad thing, that's actually what I need to get to my next level. I needed that to happen to develop these skills and abilities to work through it. It is kind of the acceptance of everything, good and bad and ugly, whatever it is. It's just like, well, this is here, so this is what I need to learn. That's kind of that part of, but once you do it 1,000 times, it's, well, I know that whatever I'm given, I can work through it and I can bring it to a better place. And there's going to be wisdom for it for me on the other end. There's like kind of this willingness to face things because it's like that's how you grow. I think all of us think that we get to this certain place and it's just smooth sailing. But there's always like new things you want. There's always new adventures to explore. So it's just, well, you just regain this ability to trust yourself that whatever I'm faced with, like I know I can get back to center because I've done it so many times. So it doesn't matter what's going on around me. I can figure out how to navigate my way through that. That's from falling into a bunch of pits. It's from a lot of pain and suffering and letdowns and disappointments. And still today, I live very much in a lot of uncertainty with a lot of things. It's kind of by design because it's just like, that's what the growth path is. You just learn to have peace no matter what's going on. And there are some things that still get the best of me from time to time, but I can work through that in a day or two, where it might have taken me like a month or two before. So staying stuck doesn't happen too often. It's just that willingness to take risks, put yourself out there in new ways, and just really trust that no matter what happens, I'll be okay. I think a big piece is financial safety and security is a big centerpiece for a lot of people, right? Where it's, well, I'll only do it under these circumstances and I have to have this safety net and I have to have, all these things in place. But the further along you get, you remove safety nets. You're just like, oh, I'm just going to do this and I have no idea how I'm going to make it happen, but I'll make it happen. That's working through that all the time. And it's me basically falling and needing the safety net over and over again. A lot of that was my 20s, where every time I tried to create stability, it just like was never there. There's points where I got stuck. There was points where I didn't know where to turn, all that stuff. But it's throughout that process, you're trying to earn this idea of, I know I'll be okay no matter what. There's a solution to every problem. I've been through a million things harder than this. I can get through this too. You develop a resourcefulness where it's, if I feel a nudge to take an action, like even if it's terrifying, it's okay. Yeah, I got to do this because I've dedicated practices every day to find my center first thing in the morning. Every day, I'm just trying to become clear so that I just ask the question, what am I supposed to do today? I work from that place, or who needs help, or who do I need to reach out to? Like those types of things. So none of it's like scripted. None of it's planned out. It's kind of, I just try to get in the flow of things, and it's setting things up, doing that on a daily basis. It's just like, I can get into flow so much faster. So all these things are practices, they're skills. And it's like building a mindset that allows for the acceptance of all of it. If something unexpected happens, I might feel like that's a bad thing, but I know that that's actually, I'm going to have some new insights. I'm going to see the problem differently, and I'm going to feel better within a matter of hours usually. That's really the confidence that I try to gain through this work, is I can be dynamic. I can put myself in any situation, and I trust that I'll be okay. And each time you do that, you develop more and more skills that start to stabilize, even if there is uncertainty around you.
Right. Awesome.
So we'll give a few suggestions on how to rebuild some self-trust here. First, it's start small. You make, just like anything, we're making small commitments. It's things you can keep. It's things that are aligned with your life, things that we don't want to rearrange everything overnight. How do I work this small thing into my life that I know I can execute on? As you stay consistent with that, you just keep growing it. So it's just, I trust myself to do this on a daily basis. And because I'm doing it on a daily basis, I'm getting more efficient with it. From that place, I'm increasing my capacity. So you start small and then you work your way up. So we want to shift out of self-judgment to self-compassion. So that's this idea of, well, the inner critic, That's going to be the voice of shame. That's going to be, I made a mistake. I did something I wasn't supposed to do. I'm a bad person, whatever it is. We want to hear that voice. And then we want to start to soften it. We want to make adjustments to how can I let myself off the hook here? We're letting ourselves off the hook by learning about the situation. I understand what I did wrong here. We're taking it's accountability, responsibility. Like I understand what I did wrong here and I'm going to try better in the future. And so these are the adjustments I'm going to make. That's how we develop self-compassion is we see that everybody makes mistakes. We're all doing the best we can. None of us are going to be perfect every time. If I have a lot going on, I'm more apt to make a mistake if I'm under a lot of stress. So it's creating these buffers, these windows to how do I soften this? How do I let myself off the hook? As long as we're doing the work to improve, that's how we really get to self-compassion is because I stop making the same mistake twice. I learn from it each time and I get better. So I can start to, every time a mistake comes up, I'm starting to build that muscle of I'm going to face it and work through it. And I don't need to really beat up on myself about it anymore. The next one is going to be practice listening to your instincts. When you get that nudge, when you're like, something feels off about this, let's not play it out. It's okay, something's off about this. Maybe I explore it a little bit more. Maybe I don't fully commit. Maybe I give it a little bit of time and space and let things reveal themselves to me. I don't need to act on things right away. And if I'm ever feeling pressured into a decision and that doesn't feel good to me, then yeah, I need to create that space. I need to allow some buffer to get connected to myself and decide what's right for me. If there's external pressures that are kind of adding to the urgency of the situation, ask for more time. Extend the timeline is kind of the big thing with anything in life. There's very few things that are like an immediate now thing. Most things don't have to happen instantaneously. I need a little more time to wrap my mind around this and get to a place where I feel good about it. So ask for that time and space if you need to. Reframing mistakes as learning opportunities. That's a huge one. That's how we learn to begin with. It's just making it okay. We want to do the best we can, of course. If it happens, what can I learn about this? How can I do it better? Why did I respond this way? Why did I behave this way? We're doing the self-inquiry to try and dig a little bit deeper to see why this showed up for us. As we understand those pieces, the problem starts to resolve itself. As we gain that self-knowledge, now that's where that furthers my self-compassion because I'm actually like kind of trusting myself more because I know I'm going to do the work to clean up any problem I create. When we create problems and then we just leave them there and run away, that's a whole different ballgame where I'm not building that integrity. I'm not building that character to follow through on things because I'm not wanting to face the things that could be learning experiences for me if I face them. The last one is this is much of what I talk about relative to me, but it's creating this like decision-making framework. It's under what context am I making this decision? How does this align with my values? Is there an out, like if I move forward with this and I don't like it? It's thinking things through before we just take immediate action. We want to be able to take immediate action if that's what's needed, but most things aren't that. What do I need to do to feel okay about moving forward with this? I need to develop some sort of thought process. If I need to talk it through with somebody, if I need to sit and meditate on it, I'm going to do those things because like, I don't want to commit to things that are going to trap me or that are going to keep me in prolonged periods of time where like, I don't feel like I have power or choice. So that's the ultimate thing is we can trust ourselves more when we feel like we can guide our destiny more. What do I need to feel okay about these decisions? And I want to do that work on the front end. So those are some basic suggestions about how to start to really build that self-trust and kind of restore that. And ultimately, it is examining the things from the past, that self-betrayal or being betrayed by others. Let's say you really trusted somebody and they betrayed you. That's a piece that could use some work. That can be very damaging. It's trying to figure out when I was younger, was I empowered to make decisions or was I constantly told what to do? All those kinds of things. Those help us get an idea of, well, yeah, I continuously had to give my power away. I was in a strict environment. There wasn't freedom. If I'm given freedom, I don't know what to do with it. We're going to build in freedom over time by restoring the self-trust through these things that we've talked about.
I think the conversation we had today, Brandon, is super helpful. There's so much here to think about and to work on. If somebody's wanting to work with you on a different level, go deeper with you, what are the best options for them to connect?
Yeah. So first of all, it's to schedule a strategy session with me at my website, brandonthielk.com. I do a free 30-minute strategy session and kind of break things down and see what you've got going on and where you want to head in your life. I offer one-to-one coaching. That I also offer group coaching through the Lightning Lab. Through the Lightning Lab, we meet 3 times a month. And so 2 of those are teaching sessions and one Q&A session per month, and then along with weekly exercises and also a community chat. If you have any interest in that, you can schedule a strategy session, or you can book that through my website as well. So this period we're covering authentic confidence. So we're really working about how to get connected, how to rebuild the self-trust, how to create awarenesses around maybe where you're sabotaging or where you're not fully aligning with yourself, and that's hurting your confidence. Ultimately, self-trust and confidence go hand in hand. It's this ability to take action and figure it out as you go and not need to know everything ahead of time. It's this resilience to work through problems and stresses. And in that place, we develop skills and abilities that take us further and create the brighter future that we're wanting. All these things are skills that can be developed, and I'd be happy to help you through it and help guide the conversation if you want to book a session with me. So thanks for listening. Yes, it's a big one here. I hope you
Yeah.
guys got a lot of value out of this.
It was awesome. I'll make sure all the links to the places to connect with Brandon are in the show notes, as well as all the social places, YouTube, Instagram, all that sort of stuff. All that's in the show notes. And I just have to add here, as we're wrapping up the 10th podcast, if you have comments, feedback, questions for us, we'd really love for you to share them. So if you made it to this point and you're enjoying the podcast so far, we'd also really appreciate any reviews you might leave, subscriptions, all that kind of stuff would be super cool.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, I love the feedback. So,
Yeah.
all right, guys. Well, thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right. Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.